Assalamualaikum. Good morning, everyone. So this morning, I'd like to share with you another movement, which is all about globalization. Globalization is arguably the most important factors currently shaping the world economy. Although it is not a new phenomenon, or we have the so-called waves of globalization, it can be traced back to the 1800s. The changes it is bringing about now occurs far more rapidly, spread much widely, and have much greater business, economic, social impact than ever before. When we talk about globalization, there are a lot of definitions. So allow me to share with you these different definitions depending on the organizations and the situations. Globalization is the spread of manufacturing, services, market, culture, lifestyle, capital, technology, and ideas across the national boundaries around the world. It is also the integration of these geographically dispersed economic and the social activities. And it is also the huge impacts on people and nation. The whole world is affected by the so-called globalization. This is also a new buzzword that has come to dominate the world since the 90s and the last century with the end of the Cold War and the breakup of the former Soviet Union. The term implies widely integration or amalgamation of the various cultures, styles, economic policies, ideas, and others. It must not be confused with the making things common around the world. It is an integration, not simulation. So once again, with this, making things, do not be confused with making things around the world. It is an integration, not simulation. Globalization is a consequence of increased trade across nations. According to Anthony Giddens in his research in 1990, described globalization as the intensifications of the worldwide social relations which link distinct localities in such a way that the local happenings are shaped by the events occurring miles away. So that's why there are terms and other terms of globalization. Maybe from this definition is the globalization is the borderless world. So there was a time when most regions were economically self-sufficient. Locally produced foods, fuels, and raw materials were generally processed by a local consumption. Trade between different regions were quite limited. Today, the economies of the most countries are so interconnected that they form part of the single interdependent global economy. So from maliitan, ngayon pamalakihan. And because of this globalization, the world nowadays is becoming smaller, smaller, and smaller. Especially when we talk about economies. Because of this interconnectedness with each other. It is also integration. It was mentioned in the previous slide. Integration with economic, political, as well as cultural system across the globe. Or is it Americanization of the world culture and the United States dominance of the world affairs? Or perhaps McDonaldization of the world? And I think pwede. Because we Filipinos, we have the so-called colonial mentality. What is imported ay mabuti. Ang sa atin may problema. Okay? Maaring isa yung dudulot din sa so-called globalization. Is it a force of economic growth, prosperity, or democratic freedom? Well, it can be, and why? Because globalization also an integration of political. That's why everywhere in the world, pag election ng United States, what happened? Everywhere in the world, every countries are affected pag may election. Or is it a force for environmental devastation, exploitation of the developing world, or a suppression of human rights? Yes, can be. And why? Because of this, the technologies, the industrialization, what is happening now of our environment is because of this. Then there are three main categories or frames. The first is the positive frame, points to the potential gains and benefits of globalization. So that's something positive, that frame, the benefits and gains of globalization, not only one country, but of course, it is a borderless world to the whole in general. Then the natural frame portrays globalization as a natural, evolutionary, and largely inevitable development. This discourse, which is associated with financial community, avoids making moral judgment. That's why it's neutral. Then the last category of frames is the negative frame. Points out that the increasing potential for economic crisis, the threat of the livelihoods of workers, and the growing income inequality caused by globalization. This frame also includes discourse which is primarily concerned with the negative impact of globalization in the third world. Yes, it's true, especially the third world country. Mga mahirap na country talagang very much affected when we talk about globalization. So those are the three main frames or categories of this globalization. So there are also another definitions depending on the organization. According to the United Nations of Economics and Social Commission of the Western Asia, or EXQA, globalization is a widely used term that can be defined in a number of different ways, but when used in an economic context, it refers to the reduction and the removal of barriers between the national borders in order to facilitate the flow of goods, capital, services, and labor. So ito yung sinasabi ko kanina, the borderless world. Then from the International Monetary Fund, from the IMF, globalization refers to the economic growth interdependence of countries worldwide throughout the increasing volume and variety of cross-border transactions in goods and services and the international capital flows, and also through the more rapid and spread diffusion of technology. More or less, they are interrelated. Then from the American Forum of the Global Education, globalization is the acceleration of intensification and intensification of interactions and integrations among people, companies, governments, and the different nations. Then from the Geneva Center of Security or for Security Policy, globalization is a process that encompasses the causes, course, and consequences of transnational and transcultural integration of human common activities. If you notice these definitions, the different definitions, as I say, they are interrelated. Integration, palaging binabanggit yung the word integration. Then from the UNESCO, globalization can be defined as a set of economic, social, technological, political, and cultural structures and processes arising from the changing character of the production, consumption, trade of goods and assets that comprise the base of international political economy. Then from the World Bank Group, globalization is the growing integration of economies and societies around the world. Then from the Organizations for Economic Cooperation and Development, globalization refers to all the dynamic and multidimensional process of economic integration whereby national resources become more and more internationally mobile while national economies become increasingly interdependent. So once again, talks about more on economy. Then another, according to Thomas Friedman, the inexorable integration of markets, nation states, and technologies to a degree never witnessed before, in a way that is enabling individuals, corporations, and the nation states to reach around the world farther, faster, deeper, and cheaper than ever before, and in a way that is producing a powerful backlash from those brutalized or left behind by this new system. Globalization means the spread of free market capitalism to virtually every country in the world. So that's free market naman ang binabanggit. Then globalization encompasses the internationalization. That's the trade and investment. Then the freeing markets or the liberalization, cultural interchange or the universalization, and the westernization or the western cultural dominance. Kaya nga, this is part of the movement of the social movement because all over the world are affected because of this. Then there are sources of this globalization. The trade and finance, the international economic activity, the global liberalization or the domestic and as well as the international, the technological changes, the IT revolution in speed and cost, then the improvements of transportation, containerized shipping, then the globalized production structures or the stateless corporation. So these are the sources of this globalization. Globalization, once again, is inevitable, resentless. Anti-groups are fighting physically only. Then pro-globalization has facts to back up, and it is a good thing. So there is good, there is bad. Then we'll do that one later. Then the types, there are a lot of types as we discussed in the previous topic. I think the previous one, but here in this another types of globalization is the economic, and it was mentioned in the previous slides. Countries that trade with many others have few trade barriers are ecumenically globalized. Then the social, a measure of how easily information and ideas pass between people in their own country and between the different countries, includes the access to internet and the social media network. And because of this, the internet and the social media network, as I said, the world nowadays is becoming smaller, smaller, and smaller. Before, ang lawak-lawak, ang layo-layo, halos hindi maabot. But because of this technology, our relationship, we talk about social, malapit na lang, harap-harapan makausap mo na coming from the other countries. Then the amount of political cooperation there is between countries. And of course, as I said, pag may election ng United States, lahat apektado because they are the superpower. So look at this the diagram. When we talk about globalization, the culture, the society, the politics, the economy, the environment, they are interconnected. So these are the impacts on the government, the positive effects as well as the negative effects. So when we talk about globalization, of course, may maganda at saka may di maganda. Then on the positive effects, the increased economic development, yes. Then expanded infrastructure, yes. Then the transfer of the modern management techniques and the greater interdependence among business partners. While the negative effects, the multinational corporation power increase. Yes, kasi kahit saan-saan na lang sila magtayo. Then, pero yung bakit negative? Because ang mga maliliit, wala na. Then, the multinational corporations externalizes cost to countries. Then, competition results too many concessions. Then, the multinational corporations influence local policies. Yan. Then companies incorporate in low-tax countries. Then the pressure to reduce social benefits. So that's the negative effects of the so-called globalization. Another thing, on labor, the impact on labor. The positive thing, the increased job opportunities, yes. Then upgraded education system, then the increased training, that's the positive thing. But what about the negative effects? Job displacement, and we know that one. The loss of industries or the economic groups, then lowered labor standards, then downward wage pressure, then decreased union power, then diminished social contract. So that's the negative effect on labor. Then there are also the bright as well as the dark side when we talk about globalization. What about the bright side? Globalization let the country do what they can do best. If, for example, you buy cheap steel from another country, you don't have to make your own steel. You can focus on computers or other things. Yes, that can be. Dito nga sa Iligan, mayroon tayo, 'di ba, yung may kumpanya diyan sa mga steel, pero ngayon nawala na. Maybe na purdoy. Then another bright side, globalization gives you a larger market. You can sell more goods and make more money. You can create more jobs. That's the bright side. Then consumers also profit from globalization. Products become cheaper and you can get new goods more quickly. Resulta nga yun sa pandemic, I think this is the, kung bright side man ito, dami-dami ng online. Kasi ang bilis. This, then mura. Then mga bagong mga goods. Then what about the dark side? Globalization causes unemployment in industrialized countries because firms move their factories to places where they can get cheaper workers. Ayun. Another thing, globalization may lead to more environmental problems. Environmental problems. A company may want to build factories in other countries because environmental laws are not as strict as they are at home. Poor countries in the third world may have not cut down more trees so that they can sell wood to richer countries. Ayun ang talagang the dark side. Kawawa ang third world. Okay? Especially yung hindi masyado mahigpit ang batas. Remember Gina Lopez? Mahal niya ang kalikasan. Pero anong ginawa ng ating mga babatas? Hindi siya na-appoint as DNR Secretary. Kaya dahil stricto siya. But in general, this is one of the dark side of the so-called globalization. Then globalization can lead to financial problems. That's another dark side. In 1970s and 80s, countries like Mexico, Thailand, Indonesia, or Brazil got a lot of money from investors who hope they can build up new businesses there. These new companies often did not work, so they had to close down and investors pulled out their money. So, ang sama ng resulta. What about in our country, the Philippines? Utang ng utang lang tayo. Ngayon sa Asia, ang superpower ang China. Anong ginawa sa China? Maro-maro din. Okay? Kaya sabi ni Duterte, a friend man tayo, but a friend hindi mag-aabuso. Pero anong klaseng friend ang kinin ang ating lugar? But well, that's the problem of the third world country. Kaya nga itong mga superpower, they take advantage. Then some of the poorest country in the world, especially in Africa, may get even poorer. Their population is not as educated as in the developed countries, and they don't have a new technology that we do. Okay, at least sila yung pinakamayag sa ating Pilipinas, medyo naiangatin. Human, animals, and plants diseases can spread more quickly through globalization. The African swine fever, the bird flu, and the rest. Noon wala man yan, pero ngayon ang grabe, ang bilis, karating agad sa atin. A pandemic, of course. Okay? Global din itong phenomenon na ito, karating agad. Is it because of globalization? And we do not know, because now there are a lot of theories na baka gawa ito para patayin, mabawasan ang mga tao sa mundo. And we do not know. Do you think globalization is good or bad? It is your choice. So it's up to us because we know the positive as well as the negative effects when we talk about globalization. Is it good? Yes. Is it bad? Yes. But it's up to us. It's up to you. It is our choice. Then there are causes of globalization. Improve communication. The development of communication technologies such as internet, the email, and the mobile phones have been vital to the growth of globalization because they help the multinational corporations to operate throughout the world. And yes, that's true. Sabi nga natin, the world nowadays is becoming smaller, and smaller because of this modern technology. The development of satellite TV channels as the Sky or the CNN have also provided worldwide marketing avenues for the concept and products of globalization. I think you would also agree with that. That the improved transport. The development of refrigerated and container transport, the bulk shipping, and the improved airport has allowed the easy mass movement of goods throughout the world. This assists the globalization. Tama naman. Okay? Ang bilis na nga. Okay? Sa shippings of these goods. Then the free trade. Kaya nga, one of which free trade is the name of the game when I talk about this globalization. The multinational corporations and rich capitalist countries have always promoted the global free trade as a way of increasing their own wealth and influence. Like China now in Asia. At saka gusto nila sa buong mundo na sila na mag-superpower. Then, the international organizations such as the World Trade Organization and the IMF also promote free trade. Free trade. Kaya nga, Today, free trade is the name of the game. Then the global banking. Modern communication technologies allow the vast amounts of capital to flow freely and instantly throughout the world. The equivalent of up to 1.3 trillion US dollars is traded each day through international stock exchange in the cities such as New York, in London, as well as in Tokyo, and I think in the other countries. Then the growth of the multinational corporation. The rapid growth of these big multinational corporations such as Microsoft, then the McDonald's, the Nike. The Nike is a cause as well as a consequence of globalization. Alam natin yon. Then the investment of the multinational corporations in farms, the mines, the factories across the world is a major part of globalization. Farm size, kasi the farms, may mga GMO na tayo na ang bilis, na hindi na matablan ng mga peste. And ito yun, isa yun sa inudulot din ng globalization. Then globalization allows the MNCs to produce goods and services to sell products on a massive scale throughout the world. So yun, alam na natin yun lahat. Then what about the effects of this globalization? Ito, change food supply. The food supply is no longer tied with the seasons. We can buy food everywhere in the world at any time of the year. Tama talaga ito. Kaya napansin ninyo siguro, kahit na si Pilipinas. And bakit? Kasi ang kalikasan hindi na rin alam niya because of this global warming. Hindi na alam. Kaya nga noon, di ba ang ganda pa, tag-ulan, tag-init. Mga farmers natin, pag tag-init, alam nila ang itatanim nila. Pag tag-ulan, alam din itatanim nila. Pero ngayon, summer, may bagyo. Pag taglamig naman, sa atin, grabing init. Okay, so that's a problem. So ito yung isa sa effects ng globalization. Kaya nga, anytime, we can buy food everywhere in the world at any time of the year. Kahit na sa atin, di ba, may season tayo ng mga mangga. Every summer yan. Magbunga talaga yung mangga. Pero ngayon, isang spray lang, kahit anong buwan, o at least nandyan na, anytime mabibili mo. Then, the division of labor. Because the multinational corporations search for the cheapest location to manufacture and assemble components, production processes may be moved from developed to developing countries where costs are lower. So, alam natin yon, mga sasakyan. Galing sa big time na multinational corporations, dalhin doon sa mga hirap na bansa, doon i-assemble, and at least kasi mas mura. Then, the less job security. In a global economy, jobs are becoming more temporary and insecure. Okay? Then, survey of the American workers showed that people now hold 7 to 10 jobs over their working life. So, maganda sa kanila in the other European countries. Kasi kahit anong trabaho mo, magkasweldo ka. Pero sa atin, the third world countries, ang malaking problema. Okay? Sabi nga dyan, the job security, a sense of protection from the job loss, something that no longer exists. Pero may problema talaga when I talk about to the third world countries. Kaya nga, ito yung mga sigaw ng mga tao. We want our job back. This is all crazy. Outsourcing is killing our economy. We need to reinstate tariff. Okay, yun yung mga sigaw ng taong bayan. So another one, the damage to the environment. More trade means more transport, which uses more fossil fuels and causes pollution. Yes, air pollution. Okay, kaproblema talaga tayo. The noise pollution, that's another thing. Light pollution, lahat-lahat na pollution nandoon na. Then climate change is a serious threat to our future. Climate change is a serious threat to our future. Kaya nga, hindi na alam ng kalikasan kung saan siya lulugar dahil sa nasira na talaga siya. Okay? Alam natin yon. Then, the cultural impact. Websites such as YouTube connect people across the planet. As the worldwide becomes more unified, diverse cultures are being ignored. The multinational corporations can create a monoculture as they remove local competition and thereby force local firms to close. Ayun. Talagang problema yan. Okay? May Starbucks dyan. Then replacing yan sa mga big time na. Okay. Then the increase of anti-globalization protests. There are growing awareness of the negative impacts of globalization. People have begun to realize that globalization can be challenged by the communities supporting each other in business and societies and throughout the public protests and political lobbying. In the Philippines, the country is taking part in the process of globalization ever since the country signed an agreement in the World Trade Organization in 1995. Now, globalization is very effective in the Philippines. It allows major changes in the nation like more labor, more Filipino and foreign companies has emerged in the nation in order to help the country's developing economy. Yes, yun. That's the positive thing. That's a positive one. Pero pagdating sa China naman, nagpakalyado ni Duterte sa China, sino namang mga workers, nagdadala din sila ng sarili nilang workers dito. Kaya nga marami mga illegal workers dito. So that's one na nangyari. Yes, maraming natulungan. Pero at the end of the day, masusustain kaya ito. Kasi iba naman, lahi ng mga worker. Kahit naman yung mga kalsada, mga bridges pinatayo, sino mga main engineers? Filipino? I don't think so. Mga Chinese pa rin. Kasi sabi nga dito rin, friend. Friend na minaruan tayo. Then isisi agad doon sa previous administration. Bininta na nila yun noon, ganito, ganyan. But in fairness naman, nanalo tayo sa International Tribunal. But well, that's a political problem. Pero, apektado tayo lahat. Okay? So once again, yes, epektibo siya sa Pilipinas. Pero masusustain kaya ito. Then globalization can make the Philippines into a better nation if the Philippine leaders make their economy more advanced through the global trading and allowing more foreign investors to help boost the economy. And by accomplishing those goals, the Philippines should be able to reduce the poverty level as well as an increase of labor force for job opportunities for those that are in need for a living. However, since poverty level is still increasing, most Filipinos have managed to find work overseas and they have managed to seek better living than in the Philippines. The most effective factor in the Philippines is education. The society's mentality is to be educated and it's with the education that people in the nation see their opportunity for a better life in the future. So ito nga ang masakit. Sabi nga, nakakatulong sa Pilipinas. Then the question, why the good Filipinos, mga workers natin nandoon sa ibang bansa, sila yung nakinabang. Kasi ang baba talaga dito sa atin. And we cannot blame those people. Okay? Kahit na siguro tayo, if we have opportunity, bakit magpauga tayo sa Pilipinas? Okay? That's the point there. So, sabi nga natin, nakakatulong ba talaga itong globalization? Sabi nga nakakatulong, but nagdepende din talaga sa leaders. Okay? Nagdepende sa kung sino yung leaders natin na may political will din. Then advantages, peaceful resolutions. Most of the countries have resorted to trade relations with each other in order to boost their economy, leaving behind any bitter past experiences, if any. Siguro alam natin yan. Peaceful relations. Pero ayaw man ni Duterte sa Amerika. May peaceful relations ba? Noon meron. Pero ayaw niya. Yung pag-upo pa lang niya, talagang binanatan niya. Okay. Pero gusto niya ang China. Advantages? Well, you can judge and you can analyze. Employment. Considered as one of the most crucial advantages, globalization has led to the generation of the numerous employment opportunities. Companies are more towards the developing countries to acquire labor force. Pwede? Then when we talk about education, every critical advantage that has aided the population is the spread of education. With numerous educational institutions around the globe, one can move out from home country for a better opportunities elsewhere. So when we talk about education, that's why there are a lot of scholarship. Then product quality. The product quality has more enhanced so as to retain the customers. Today, the customers may comprise with the price range but not with the quality of the product. Low or poor quality can adversely affect consumer satisfaction. So, yun din yung problema. Then the cheaper prices. Globalization has brought in fierce competition in the market. Then when you talk about communication, every single information is easily accessible from almost every corner of the world. Circulation of information is no longer a tedious task and can happen in seconds. The internet has significantly affected the global economy, thereby providing direct access to information and products. So, ganun talaga kabilis. Ganun talaga kabilis. Kaya nga marami din ngayong mga fake news. So, yun din yung titingnan natin. Then, the transportation considers the wheel of every business organization. Connectivity to various parts of the world is no more a serious problem. Today, with the various modes of transportation available, one can conveniently deliver the products to a customer located at any part of the world. Okay? Mga online, ang bilis, 2 to 3 days or even a day, nandyan na sa bahay mo. Then the GDP, the gross domestic product increase, commonly known as the GDP. This is the money value of the final goods and services produced within the domestic territory of the country during an accounting year. So alam natin yan in our economics, the gross domestic product. The free trade is a policy in which country does not levy taxes, duties, subsidies, or the quota in the import or export goods of services from other countries. There are countries which have resolved the free trade in a specific regions. This allows customers to buy goods and services comparatively at a lower cost. Then the travel and tourism. Globalization has promoted tourism to great heights. International trade among the different countries also help in increasing the number of the tourists that visits the different places around the world. So yon, tourism, grabe na yan ngayon. Everywhere in the world. Then the external borrowing. With the help of the globalization, there is an opportunity for corporate, national, and subnational borrowers to have a better access for external finance with facilities such as external, commercial borrowing, and syndicated loans. What about the disadvantage? So, may advantages, may disadvantage din. When it comes to health issues, globalization has given rise to more health risks and presents new threats and challenges for epidemic. pandemic na sa atin ngayon. Okay? Then the dawn of HIV or the AIDS, having its origin in the wilderness of Africa, the virus has spread like the wildfire throughout the globe in no time. Kaya nga, hindi lang AIDS ngayon, itong sabi ni Duterte, the virus, ang virus 19, sabi ni Duterte, from China to all over the world. Okay? Then the food items are also transported to the various countries, and this is a matter of concern, especially in the case of the perishable goods. So that's a disadvantage. Then the loss of culture, ayon. With a large number of people moving into and out of the country, the culture takes a back seat. People may adopt the culture of their resident country. They tend to follow the foreign culture more, forgetting their own roots. This can give rise of cultural conflicts. So this is true. Even the language nawawala. Kaya nga yung iba, mga hambugiro na. Okay? Galing Amerika, kahit na matanda na sila, pagbalik dito, hindi na marunong sa kanilang sariling wika. And that's the problem. So, culture, the language, of course, nawawala. Especially the kultura. Ayaw na magsuot ng ganito. Kasi, bakya, dapat ito yung isusuot nila. So, that's a disadvantage. Then, the uneven wealth distribution. It is said that the rich are getting richer while the poor are getting poorer. In a real sense, globalization has not been able to reduce poverty. Tandaan ninyo ha, the advantages as well as the disadvantages. Sabi natin kanina, is globalization good or is it bad? But it is your choice. Yun yung sabi ko kanina. Sabi nga, nakakatulong sa Pilipinas. Pero sabi dito, globalization has not been able to reduce poverty. Then another disadvantage, the environmental degradation. The Industrial Revolution has changed the outlook of the economy. Industries are using natural resources by means of mining, drilling, etc., while puts a burden on the environment. Ito malaking problema talaga. Okay? Then the disparity. Though globalization has opened new avenues like wide markets and unemployment, there is still a disparity in the development of the economies. Structural unemployment owes to the disparity created. Developed countries are moving their factories to foreign countries where labor is cheaply available. Then conflicts is another disadvantage. It has given a rise of terrorism, other forms of violence such as the acts that only cost a loss of human life but also a huge economic losses. Then the cutthroat competition. Opening the doors of international trade has given birth to the intense competition. This has affected in the local markets dramatically. The local players thereby suffer huge losses as they lack the potential to advertise or export their products on a large scale. So therefore, domestic markets shrink. So yon, pinaka. Now, for your assignment of this presentation, please answer this question. The first, explain how improvement in standard of living is the most significant impact of globalization. Then second, explain how increased competition among nations is the most significant impact of globalization. Third, explain how widening income gap is the most significant impact of globalization. So, please answer those three questions, then you can submit it through the messenger. And with that, I'd like to say thank you and God bless you all. Mabuhay tayong lahat.